This is Josh Reeves, and you're listening to the Mile High Church podcast. Kudos to you for focusing on your spiritual growth. Speaking of spiritual growth, have you had your moment of awe today? Dr. Keltner wrote a great book called Awe, and it's all about how awe can heal us, uplift us, and keep us dialed in. He's going to be at Mile High Church on November 1st talking about it. You can join us in person. You can join us online. It's going to be fantastic. Check out milehighchurch.org.
And so today, we continue on our journey, this adventure in faith. And our theme has been finding oneness in an ocean of uncertainty. And today we are particularly focused on the wisdom that comes from spiritual discernment. Discernment has everything to do, really, with our spiritual perception. It's that way that we get in touch with our inner voice. It's about our sense of relationship and connection with the divine, and how we tend that in our daily life. And how do we really become, through our connection, through our awareness, through our consciousness, this channel for good in the world? You know, it can be really hard when we feel tossed about by tidal waves of doubt and storms of fear. I know for myself, those usually come in the middle of the night when I wake up and all the things that have been kind of bubbling below the surface during the day have a chance to really rise to the surface of my awareness so that I can face them in that quiet time. And it's about how do we face all of the uncertainty around us when thoughts of the unknown begin to cloud our ability and our connection, that sense of guidance that comes when we feel connected to the divine within us. You know, in ancient times, mariners, navigators would pick up a spyglass and they would look out on the horizon. And they would be looking for any sense of danger. They'd be looking for hazards that were coming in the way. Maybe it's a landmass. Maybe it was an iceberg, or maybe it was another ship. But it allowed them to peer far out so that they could see, and they could chart their course, and they could magnify the path forward. Nearly 15 years ago, I found myself in an ocean of uncertainty in my work as a school psychologist. I had been working for several years in an inner city school. It was an elementary school, and it had 650 students. And the mental health needs in this school were so great that we even had a padded room so that when children became distressed, that they would have a safe place to be able to return to calm. And every single day, that room was used several times a day. And the stress was so high, and the resources were so low. And I was beginning to feel a deep sense of uncertainty, and that stress that was coming from my work was beginning to bubble over into my family life at home. And about that time, wouldn't you know it, a friend called me up and she said, you know, I have this ticket to Costa Rica for spring break and I'm not able to go. It's this yoga retreat. Would you be interested in going in my place? And I said, well, yeah, I think I would. I think that would be perfect timing. And before I knew it, I was dropped in the rainforests of Costa Rica, and I was all alone, didn't know anyone, and I was on a yoga excursion with a group of folks from Canada. It was great. It was great. We were doing yoga under waterfalls, and we were hiking through the rainforest. We were singing spiritual songs in the rivers at night, and the volcano was erupting. The lava, with its geothermal warming, was heating up the pools where we sat. And we would sit under the stars every single day. And it was in that pause, it was in that respite, a respite that I wasn't even sure that I knew that I needed, that I began to get in touch with the fact that my nervous system had been on complete, full alert. And I had been in survival mode for so long that my vision was clouded and I was uncertain. This trip turned out to be the eye in the storm of my life. And I wonder if you've ever had those moments where life has sent you little glimpses along the way. Life has sent you little hints of slowing down, invitations, if you will, but that perhaps you've been so stirred up or you've been in so much stress and so much worry that you've missed the signs. That was what I was feeling in that moment. I feel like the signs are always raining down around us, but it's really difficult to pick them up when we're in such a state of turmoil. And I remember on a day nearing the end of this adventure that I sat amongst the trees and the birds, and I put my headphones on so that I could really go within. And in my headphones, I put a song by Deva Premal and Mitten called So Much Magnificence. And I remember I spent maybe hours, I don't know how long it was, but I fully fell into the sounds and the song, and I sang with them. I sang along with them until I began to really feel a little touch of magnificence. And it took that immersion and that calming down so that I could slowly begin to turn my boat in a different direction. I heard it here for the first time. Many years ago, I was in the Vote Auditorium on a Sunday, and Dr. Roger was given the message. And I remember, till this moment actually, I remember it because he was talking about the nautical concept of trim tabbing. And I remember him saying that, if you're a sailor, you can't simply, if you decide you want to go in a different direction, you can't simply turn the wheel of the boat, because you know what'll happen? It'll capsize, and you'll be in the water. And he said, if you want to go in a different direction, and if you want to go in a different direction in your life, he said, you've got to trim tab degree by degree, ever so slightly, in another direction. That's how you change the course. That's how you begin to create differently in your life. Discernment is like that. And on the way home from that adventure, it became super clear that I was going to have to take a stand. I was going to have to get out of the uncomfortability, and I was going to have to start. We were called child advocates in those days. I was going to have to start advocating for the needs that were needed in the school, with the staff, with the students, and we were going to have to turn this boat around. Discernment is absolutely like trim tabbing. It's about those subtleties of spirit, those nuances of the message. It's about what happens when we're able to listen, to really turn within, to begin to sense, to feel the slight divine impulses, those nudges. And I wonder, just as we go back to what I was saying in the welcome, if there's a place in your life right now that you are feeling that need for nudges, for more guidance, for clarity. And I wonder too, let's look together at how we might use tools of discernment to begin to slowly trim tab in another direction. Those tools are the compasses of our spiritual practice. They begin to help us to take the compass, which was also an essential mariner tool, and begin to chart a new course. And the first compass that I want to talk about this morning is the radical trust that comes through the compass of the heart. Cultivating radical trust is about all connecting in this center of our heart. The heart, the North Star of our life, comes directly. That message comes directly when we begin to really tune into the center of the heart. There are many mystical traditions that actually say that this relationship with the divine is centralized in this very heart space. The Sufi tradition refers to the heart as a palace of the divine, or as a throne of God. so it can serve as our center of divine knowledge and begin to awaken within us that deeper spiritual perception. I've recently been inspired because someone, Rob, I think I saw him out there in the audience, he came into my spiritual practices a few weeks ago and he said, "Have you seen that movie, Harriet, on Netflix?" And I said, "Well, no, I went home. I thought that was a whisper from the divine." I went home that very night and I immersed in it. And I loved it so much that I bought the autobiography of Harriet Tubman, written by Kate Clifford Lawson. And I dove into 400 pages of Harriet's life. And what really came forward is that I was so blown away by the faith that this woman had and the interior relationship she had with God. You know, she was bestowed the term Moses, and she was guided. She was guided, and she would say it. She was guided to liberate herself from slavery, but also she was guided to support the liberation of 70 other folks, many of whom were her friends and family. And she completed 13 missions over the course of her life in order to support others. And think of the countless others that she inspired to begin to join the efforts of the Underground Railroad. She was an excellent conductor in that she began to use that insight, that inspiration from the divine in order to guide her path to freedom and to safety. So much of life appeared to be stacked against her. She was a woman. She was a woman of color. She was enslaved. She had suffered a life-threatening traumatic brain injury, which left her with temporal lobe epilepsy, and she lived in a world that was just downright dangerous every turn. She even went back to the very place that she had been enslaved in order to support others to freedom. That was probably the most dangerous place she could have ever gone back to. But in spite of that, again and again and again, she turned to a deeper sense of faith to guide her way. She spoke of her connection to nature, how she was guided by the stars. She spoke about how she could feel a mysterious, unseen presence in the middle of the forest in the darkness at night. She was in tune with those subtle messages of the divine within her. She was known to pray often. And she said, you know, when danger was near, my heart would go a flutter, flutter, and I knew I had to change course. And within her, she would hear, turn left. She would hear, keep walking through the river. Even when you don't know how deep it is, go forward. She knew. So much so that the people that were interviewed that had been supported by her on the Underground Railroad said that they felt she had a special charm in her connection with God's design and power, that it flowed through her. Thomas Garrett, a prominent abolitionist and eventual partner of Harriet's, was quoted in saying he had never met another person who had more confidence in the voice of God as spoken directly to her soul. So a question that I come to when I dive into the studies and the immersion in the lives of these masters who made such a difference for the lives of others around them and for the course of humanity, a question that I come to again and again is, what was it in their faith and in their practice of their faith that built such a fortitude in that inner relationship with the divine? And what I came to when I thought of Harriet was, first and foremost, it was her sense of devotion. Devotion. She consistently turned to her prayerful practice. She was focusing on the development, the listening to, the channel that was developed between her and her inner North Star, which was her relationship with God. So I ask, how is our spiritual practice in our life? And where is it called to emerge even more with consistency, with practice each day? Through the Hindu tradition, we're given bhakti yoga. And bhakti, as you might know, means devotion. It means pure love and dedication to God. And yoga means union. So it is through that personal relationship and that practice that we're able to create that sense of devotion within ourselves. A while ago, there was a video circulating around on Facebook. Maybe you saw it. It was by Dr. Rob Kelly. He is known for his work in addiction. And he was sharing a really simple daily practice. He said, what would happen if you got up every day and you brushed your teeth with your non-dominant hand? You know why we do that? It's to awaken your brain and say, hey, something important's happening right here. Pay attention. New information. I want to code it in my brain. So you brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand, and then you take 10 really deep breaths to oxygenate your body. And then you look in the mirror. And you look in the mirror and you connect with your eyes to begin to sense that sense of the divine within. And you look right into your own eyes and you say, I love you. How would it be to begin to use that practice every day of devotion to really awaken that compass of your own heart in your life? This is very closely related to the second compass that I want to look at this morning, which is the compass of intuition, which is all about listening deeply to our body, to our heart, and to our minds. Intuition is born of the present moment. For ordination, I received a wonderful gift. It was a lovely book, perfect. It was a lovely book, and it was entitled The Dangerous Mystic. Does that sound great? The Dangerous Mystic by Joel F. Harrington, which is all about the life of Meister Eckhart. Meister Eckhart was this German mystic who lived in the time of the Middle Ages. And this book takes you right into the Middle Ages so that you can begin to understand what it would have been like to be a preacher delivering messages during that time. And he spoke all about the absolute essence of God. And he referred to it as the isness of God, which can be touched through our awareness of the present moment. That's where that isness is. It's through bringing ourselves fully present to the right here, the right now, and using our senses to inform what is here. He emphasized that listening to our inner voice is the way that we begin to harvest spiritual wisdom in our life. And he also emphasized that every single common person and person, all persons, can do this for themselves. Do you see why that made him dangerous in his times? You can do it by yourself. You can have a relationship with the divine, and you can tend it through your spiritual practice. So one way to bring attunement to our bodies, hearts, and our minds in the present moment, one tool, is through somatic resourcing. And somatic resourcing is just about really bringing ourselves fully present into our bodies, beyond the stories, beyond the things happening in our mind, and becoming a witness to the sensations that are going on in there. Simply witnessing. Do you know how powerful it is when you begin to reestablish that connection within yourself, when you simply calm down and you go within and you sense a sensation? Maybe it's tension. Maybe it's joyfulness. Maybe it's a little sparkly energy somewhere, or maybe it's a sense of pain. But how powerful it is to go within, to witness that place, and to simply tell your body, I got that. I see it. I got that. Because what that does over time, as we train ourselves and allow this practice to move us from the outer to the inner world, what that does over time is that it begins to awaken within us a sense of connection, and with that comes a sense of safety, a sense of refuge. Oh, how we become so disconnected from this body source, particularly when we are in extreme stress, particularly when we are in times of uncertainty, that refuge within has to be built and reestablished, and it can be done so through this practice. You know, I saw an absolutely fabulous example of this yesterday at our youth department's trunk or treat. It was fabulous. I hope some of you were here for that. It was just out of this world amazing. And this community brings so much love to this event. It was just palpable in the room. And one of the things I noticed is that as part of that event, there was this little sandbox set off to the edge, and it was filled with sand, and there was all sorts of little treasures hidden within it. And there was someone overseeing this sandbox, and he said to me when I walked by, and he said, you know what? The adults and the kids alike are having a real good time with that today. They said, you know what else I've noticed? Is that it's not the treasures that's really the treasure itself. Yeah, those little worms or whatever the heck was, I don't know what was in there. Those little squiggly things and stuff, little eyeballs and stuff. But anyway, even they said, you know what? People are transfixed with putting their hands in the sand and feeling those sensations. And kids are standing there for the longest time just so they can feel, so they can connect with those senses. So I encourage you this week. I encourage you to pay attention to your senses. And when you take the time, just a few moments, to pause, to go within and to check in with your body and to really connect and to also let your body know, hey, I got that. I feel that. And from that well of listening comes that sense, the compass of intuition. We're able to pick up on the subtleties that are sent our way. And that brings us to our final compass today, which is the compass of our true nature. It's that compass that is found within ourselves when we orient ourselves toward the divine within and toward the divine. When we orient, when we turn towards the divine. You know, Dr. Barry, he was singing so beautifully in his song about all the things that we have going on in our world and that we are at a danger of losing our connection with one another if our connection becomes through these devices or through the food that we're consuming, perhaps through media, through the things that are the information that is swirling all around us. And so this compass is about the discernment of paying attention to what we're consuming on a daily basis. What is it that we're reaching for? What is it that we're taking within and transmuting within ourselves? And how much of that brings a sense of the divine? Can we begin to turn towards that which feeds our emotional well-being? That which feeds our spiritual development, especially in these weeks where we feel within our country, within our nation, that things are stirred up. And it's the perfect timing to remember that we have the ability to align with and position ourselves by paying attention to what our spiritual food is. And when we forget, and when we fall down, and when we're feeling buffeted about by chaos and uncertainty and change, perhaps even then, we can begin to turn towards something that reminds us of the divine, the vastness of the divine. You know, before this service started, I was backstage and Larry was telling me, who's a guest here playing the drums, he was saying, you know, sometimes I like to go out in the countryside and I like to stand out beneath the Milky Way and look up at it. And then he had this wonderful verse. And what I remember about that verse is he said, you know, it brings me to this sense of I am, that I amness that's all around me. You know, there's a constellation known as the compass constellation, and it's known as Pyxis. And so I want you to think about the spiritual tools in your life are the compasses. The constellation of spiritual tools are your compasses that can help you to chart your course forward. They are your navigational instruments. And you can also go out in the night sky, gaze up with wonderment, understand that that is a reflection, a brilliant reflection of who you are, because the macro is always reflected in the micro. And so, Sufi teacher Irina Tweedy, I want to close with this thought from her. She said, if all of us only knew that the smallest act of ours, the tiniest thought, has such far-reaching effects as to set in motion, perhaps even, the motion that could shatter a galaxy. If we knew that deeply and absolutely, and if this realization could become engraved permanently in the center of our hearts, in our minds, oh, how mindful we would act, how mindful we would speak, how mindful we would show up, and how precious life would become in its integral oneness. Master teacher Jesus taught when he did the Sermon on the Mount. He said, let the eye be single. Let the eye be single. The light of the body is in the eye. And if the eye be single, the whole body shall be full of light. We can all have that spiritual perception that comes from discernment. And we can move into the universe, the univision that comes from knowing that inner connection, and that all of us are a part of the ocean that is God. And so I want to close today with that very song from Deva Premal and Mitten. And so I invite you right now, right where you sit, to begin to settle in, to begin to breathe into your heart space, to connect inside, and to fall into your breath, allowing it to simply be gentle and to draw you present as we move into the beauty of this song, to feel the waves of magnificence all around us as Tom sings.
There is so much magnificence near the ocean. Waves are coming in, waves are coming in.
And orient yourself and your heart as we orient towards spirit. We feel those waves of compassion, waves of gentleness, waves of joy.
There is so much magnificence near the ocean. Waves are coming in, waves are coming in.
Knowing that through our spiritual practice, we draw ourselves nearer to that sense of the divine within, as we feel right now those waves of healing, waves of abundance, waves of love, waves of serenity.
There is so much magnificence near the ocean. coming in. Waves are coming in. There is so much magnificence near the ocean. Waves are coming in. Waves are coming in.
And so it is.
Thanks for listening to the Mile High Church podcast. This podcast is made possible by the generous contributions from listeners like you. To make a donation, please visit milehighchurch.org.